Well, hey there, fellow streakers. How are you doing today? Jamie and I are excited to join you for another streaking podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. He is an individual that is the head of mental performance for the Tampa Bay Rays. He's also done that with the Boston Red Sox and the Cleveland Browns. He has all kinds of accolades behind his name, and really, he does a great job at helping individuals to figure out how to do things when they're under high stress, how to be high performers under high stress. He also hosts a daily podcast called Increase Your Impact. And each episode is only 2 to 5 minutes. And trust me, streakers, it is phenomenal. If you haven't signed up for it, you got to get it. He also is the author of two books, The Parent Pep Talks, the 10 must have mental skills your child must have to succeed in school, sports, school, and life, and Mentally Tough Teens, developing the winning mindset. Streakers, we are so excited to welcome to the Streaking Show Mr. Justin Sua. Let's start streaking.
That's awesome.
Isn't that great? Anytime he does that, I just feel like there should be background music,
Yeah.
something
Yeah,
that,
music and
little
lights.
fireworks. We're so excited to have you on this show. I had a curious question, just a little bit about what was your journey to lead you to what you're doing right now with all of the mental health, and what's your background and what brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's really fun to look back to see where I currently am, because if you would have asked me a decade ago or even 5 years ago, that if you would have said, hey, or told me you're going to be doing this in a decade or in 5 years, I would have been, what is that? Like, there's no way I'm going to do that. So it was not something that I intentionally designed my life around when I was young. I didn't even in school. So I went to BYU to play baseball, and I got my degree in broadcast journalism. So when I first got there, I went with the intentions to play in the major leagues. I didn't know what I wanted to study. After a game, there's a gentleman named Vi Sikahema who was standing by my car with his wife, and he goes, "Hey, I've never seen a Samoan play baseball. It was fun to watch you. You should get into broadcast journalism." And I thought, okay, let's do it. So I got into sports broadcasting, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the interview. I enjoyed the storytelling. I enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed broadcasting. And I got an internship at NBC Sports Los Angeles after my senior year. And the first day I realized very quickly I hated it. I did not want to do this. This is not for me. This is not how I want to, what my career was going to be. And so I thought, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do. So we moved back to Utah, and I was a seminary teacher, teaching religious education, and I loved it. I loved teaching, and I loved the youth, and I just really enjoyed it. And so I did it for 5 years, and I wanted to get a master's degree in higher education to be a better teacher. I applied to one degree and got declined for master's in higher education. I thought, okay, that's not going to deter me. I'm going to still get a master's in something. And I noticed there's a course at the University of Utah called the psychosocial aspect of sport. I called the dean and I said, "What does that mean?" And she goes, "Oh, it's the science of optimizing human performance." I said, "What does that mean?" And she goes, "Oh, basically it's helping people be the science of helping people be the best version of themselves." I was like, "There's a science to that?" She's like, "Yeah, the
Yeah.
science of motivation, the science of focus, the science of arousal control and emotional regulation for people who perform at high levels under stress." And I said, "Sign me up." And ended up finding out really quickly that I had no prerequisites. My degree in broadcast journalism did not set me up for success to get a master's degree, and my scores, my GRE, my nothing. And so I essentially begged to get in, and they took a huge chance on me. I was in academic probation right out the gate, and I just told them, I promise you, like, I'm going to give my best and I'm going to do well. And they took a chance. I'm grateful they did. Got my master's in sports psychology, and right when I graduated, I said goodbye to teaching. We were at home with, I think we had 3 kids under 4 years old, and my wife, stay at home wife. She loved it, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna leave my cushy job of of $30,000 a year, and I'm gonna go open up my own career in this field. So then I went around the Pleasant Grove, Orem, Provo area, and I just went to try to work with a lot of teenagers and youth. Wrote those 2 books while I was there. The military noticed what I was doing on social media. They brought me in to work with combat medics and military intelligence and wounded warriors, and was there for a couple of years in San Antonio and in a place called the IMG Academy. Didn't know who they were. They reached out. They said, "Hey, do you want to be the director of our mental conditioning department? So you oversee 9 practitioners and 10,000 youth." And I said, "Yes, let's do it." And then from there, the Boston Red Sox reached out. They said, "Hey, we are looking for someone to help design our curriculum for major leaguers." I said, "Let's go do it." And then the Cleveland Browns reached out. They're like, "Hey, we see what you're doing. Can you come join us?" And then the Tampa Bay Rays. And it's just been a lot of fun. So that all of that in the past decade or so. But it was, 30 years old is when I got my master's degree in this.
Wow.
And that's when I kind of said, "Okay, well, let's go try this out."
How did each one of those steps that you took, how did people hear about you? Was it through social media? I mean, is that because when did you start your podcast? Was that later? Or was that
The podcast was much later.
okay?
Podcast. So I started in 2009. I didn't start the podcast until 2015,
Okay.
and
Okay.
I think it was just a combination of word of mouth. And I use social media as a teaching platform. So one of the things that I learned is when you are teaching, that's when you do the most learning. And I needed that feedback to say, okay, am I learning? Am I able to articulate this for the market to understand? And so I would read the journal articles, I would read very complex and learn complex things and just theories and methodologies. And I'm like, okay, let me see how simple I can make it. Let me make a post about it. Let me do a podcast about it in simple terms. And people just started noticing and liking it. And I used social media as kind of my open public journal to see if it's landing with people.
See if it landed or whatever it was. The jump from seminary teacher to going, that had to be quite the jump. I mean, that was a leap of faith right there. It had to be a leap of
Well,
faith.
even before that, from sports broadcast journalism to seminary teacher to then I'll run my own company. That's those are big leaps.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and it was big leaps. And I think I would look back to my parents who are entrepreneurs. My father is an immigrant to the country from the island of Samoa. My mom, she didn't even graduate high school, and then she ended up being a vice president of a multi-million-dollar company. And so he played baseball. So I witnessed my parents being go-getters and embracing uncertainty and almost craving it. It's almost jumping when they got comfortable. It's like, let's go. And let's go do something that maybe the odds are against us, but we'll figure it out along the way. And I think I am not I love uncertainty. I love jumping into new, complex, and volatile and ambiguous situations. And I think that's something that's kind of wired in my DNA that I look back, I'm thinking, what was I thinking? I cannot believe we did that. But it just felt right at the time.
Was that, and so was your wife along for that ride too? I mean, I'm sure you guys had several conversations
That's what I
about
was
that.
thinking. I'm
Yeah.
like, I know your
Yes.
wife.
Yes, exactly. And she's been the number one, she's number one, just the person to support her. And even though obviously you have family members who think some of these ideas were terrible because it's like they're looking out for grandkids and their nephews are like, oh, what are you going to do with insurance? And what about this? And you have 3 kids in diapers, and wait, you're telling me you have no insurance and no paycheck week to week, and wait, what's going on? And so it's my Melissa, my wife, she's like, let's go, let's do it. Like we can do this. And so it's been she's been incredible.
That's fantastic.
That is
Just a
so
little
great.
bit while we're on family. So you have how many children?
We have 3 children, a
3 children.
16, a 15, and a 14-year-old.
That's right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic.
And you were telling us a little bit about how they're involved in lots of things too and doing some non-traditional things as they're pursuing their talents and ambitions. And that's awesome.
Right. Yes, it's fun to
So,
see them flourish and grow and do their thing as well. Yes.
so at what point you wrote Parent Pep Talks and another book for teens? At what point did you realize that you really loved working with the youth? There must have been something that helped that transition from sports to I want to teach teenagers. How did that happen?
Yeah, I think it was organic. I think it was
Okay.
organic. I think I realized because I was a baseball coach and youngsters, I enjoyed their
Mm-hmm.
fun. And then teaching seminary, I think I really being a high school teacher and involved with teens every day for 5 years and teaching them a topic that many of them feel forced to be at and they don't want to they don't enjoy it. I loved it to make it fun
Come
and
on, everyone loves
applicable
the
and
Old Testament and
yeah,
Isaiah.
right.
I mean, that's exactly what every teenager
Right,
wants to
right,
study.
right.
Yes.
And so it was a lot of fun to be able to, because I remember thinking to myself, I had some leaders and teachers and coaches who just for some reason they got it. They made it fun and
Yeah.
enjoyable, but there was still a high standard of excellence. And they didn't, it wasn't a party, but it was like, okay, it made me want to learn. I thought, you know what, I want to do that. I enjoy it. And so the reason I wrote Parent Pep Talks and the reason I wrote Mentally Tough Teens and the reason the Increase Your Impact podcast came was because this industry, what I'm in, usually the people who hire professionals like myself are Olympians, C-suite executives at Fortune 500 companies, or professional athletes. Millions of dollars. They want they're at the tip of the spear, and so they have resources to make them even better, to take them to the next level. Now, what broke my heart at the time is parents reaching out and just I couldn't work with all of these parents and their kids. And the most important team is the family. Like it is the family. And so I was hearing parents saying things to their kids like, hey, relax, or be confident, or focus. And these are great. You hear parents say that all the time to kids, all the time. Come on, lock in. But what parents were not doing is giving them evidence-based tools on how to do it. Great, great. You're telling your kid to relax. Have you taught them how to relax? Have you
Right.
helped them understand the effects of stress and what it's doing to their body and how their brain works and giving them a tool that works for them? Chances are no. And I just so I started having sessions with parents and saying, all right, mom and dad, I'm not gonna parents would be like, oh, you need to work with my child to help them be motivated. Well, actually, mom and dad, I want to work with you to create an environment so that you can create a climate where your child motivates themselves. Oh, you need to help my son. He needs to be more competitive, more tough. Well, dad, or mom, it might be you forcing this on them, and maybe they don't need that toughness. Maybe they just need to have fun. And I was teaching these courses, and I thought, you know what? Let me just write a book to have a manual for parents if they want to learn the same things that elite athletes are learning. And then let me do a free Increase Your Impact podcast daily. Keep it short so that the moms and dads who cannot afford a mental performance coach, I could be your mental performance coach, and you can go through all 1,700 and something episodes to learn everything that I am teaching these professional athletes, everything for free. And so that was the genesis behind it.
That's fantastic. And what you just enumerated and highlighted, illuminated, was your podcast is a streak. I mean, you've been doing that now for what, 3 years? Is that how long?
I've been doing it since I
Or
believe 15.
Oh,
15.
okay,
So
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 closer
a
to
lot longer.
7 years.
7
Yeah.
years.
15.
Yeah,
Yes,
7 years.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
That's
yes.
fantastic. And in that, there are gems of wisdom that come through that from your experiences with the Rays, with the Browns, with everyone. I mean, all of those gems come through in 2 to 3 minutes. Now, what was it when you got started on the podcast? So you mentioned a little bit of the genesis was I want to be able to do this for free, but podcasts at the time, I mean, back then they weren't like what you decided to do. I mean, they were different at the time, and you said, you know what, I'm going to keep it short and simple, and I'm going to do this. How did you get to that place?
So for me, I wanted to, anytime you start something, I was extremely busy. You want to be as frictionless as possible. And I know this as I was reading articles. I knew I wanted to provide something, provide a service. And I thought, you know what? I'm doing this for free. I'm not trying to have advertisement. I'm not trying to get any money. It's literally just almost like an audio journal. Just, I'm not going to edit it. I'm not going to worry about my microphone. I'm not going to worry about a camera. I'm not going to worry about interviews. I'm not going to worry about tripping over myself. I'm not going to make it long. I'm just going to go just to just get in the
Boom.
rhythm and just eliminate friction and not worry about what people think. And, oh, you sound like this, just go. And so I think that's really how it started. How can I make it as frictionless as I possibly can to be able to just get it out to whoever needs it? It's not fancy. It's not it's just for anyone who wants to listen is there. So I think that was how it started. Just how frictionless can we make it? And I thought, all right, if an episode is 2 minutes long, it takes me 2 minutes and 30 seconds to do total. I have no notes. I have no planning. I just think about the day. I'm like, okay, what did I talk about today with an athlete? But I want to save confidentiality. I'm not going to name drop. I'm not going to say, because players and athletes don't want me to go and share. And so let me make it as benign and let me just pull out the principle.
The principle.
Okay, let me grab my phone and let me just sit and let me just talk, and boom, 2 minutes. Okay, great. And then post it.
That is awesome.
That is awesome, because you're right. How many of us would get the chance to talk with you personally about all of the things and experiences you've had, and how generous and abundant to be able to be willing to share that with people. I think that's great. So as I've been reading a couple of some of your articles, some of them are actually a little bit older, but I love your thoughts on consistency and how important consistency is. As you've come along, where do you feel like you kind of started to learn some of these principles of consistency and simplicity, and exactly what you just said and how you started your podcast, recognizing that doing something just consistently and as simple as possible was where you're going to get the most benefit as you got started? Where did you really start to kind of learn those principles?
At home as a little kid. I think I didn't realize I was learning it as a little kid, but just my parents just really emphasizing practice, just work at it, just get better. And as a high school kid, I was a all-state California third base, full ride scholarships, and having the chance to go to different universities and kind of pick and choose some great universities. But I look back and I wasn't the biggest, strongest, fastest. I wasn't actually. I was just consistent. I would have seminar at 5 a.m. and I would wake up at 4 and start hitting. And I would just start before every morning. Just didn't need anyone to tell me what to do. And I'd come back and I'd just start doing other things. So seminar was over at 6 and I'd come home and then I'd start working out. And that's all I knew. That's all I did, because I saw my parents doing the same thing with their respective jobs. And my sister did the same thing. And so it was just kind of ingrained in me, hey, I just be consistent and you'll see, focus on the process and just let the results take care of themselves. And then as I got into the field of performance psychology, you start realizing the science of you look compounding, the combinatorial of the compounding effect of just doing a little every single day. Just be consistent. Don't get in the way of the compounding power of consistency. Just don't get in the way. Just keep going and if you do miss a day, or if you miss a week or whatever, all right, don't beat up on yourself. Get back on it. Let's just keep going. And so that's something that I think I've learned it. I learned it without explicitly learning it as a kid. Then you understand the science by studying even Anders Ericsson's work on the 10,000 hour deliberate practice. Mm-hmm. And then you see these elite athletes embracing the boredom of consistency. And then you experience it yourself and then teaching it to our kids. And so there's been a lot of inputs and substantial evidence in different aspects of my life that I've seen the benefits of it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the stories that we tell is Cal Ripken Jr.'s streak. We tell that quite a bit as far as, 2,632 consecutive games in a row and just what he did mentally to be able to do that. And a lot of what in the research that we did is to what you speak about is the mundane everyday practice inside and out. So as you're working with elite athletes and as you're working with, what are some of the obstacles to that consistency that you help them overcome?
Yeah, so I think we alluded to it first. A lot of people do not want to embrace the boredom of consistency. It's boring. It's really, really boring, and it's not supposed to be exciting and fun. It's the quiet, boring. If you see elite athletes do their routine, you'll look and you'll be like, this is not motivational. This is not. They're the quiet little tiny muscles that they work on all the time. No one's around. It's dark. They're frustrated. They're working just try to get outside of their expand their comfort zone. So I think number one, um, what they do so well is they embrace the boredom of consistency. Number two, deliberate practice, meaning a lot of people want to do what's just kind of easy to them. I just want to work on the things that I'm already good at. Well, where these elite athletes, they work on things they're not good at. It's going to be hard and frustrating, and it's going to require a lot of effort, and there's not a lot of fluency, so they struggle, and that's another part. That's an obstacle. That's a reason that's a reason why a lot of people aren't consistent, is because they can't tolerate the difficulty level of getting a little bit better every single day. I think another reason people aren't consistent is because they are a little bit too rigid. They're too rigid. They are too rigid with their process. And so they have to do this at this time and this way and this. But what about when you travel? Or what about when it's snowing outside? Or what about this? And so these elite performers, they make sure that their routines, the thing that they're consistent around, it's fluid. It could look different from different angles. It doesn't have to be this way every single time. They're loose, they're easy, and they can go. They could adapt to the environment and adapt. Another thing with streaking as well and consistency is they're able to understand. Sometimes you have to do it every single day, but if you miss a day, you can at least keep the week streak going. Okay, I might have not done it every day, but okay, I'm doing it every week. If you miss a week, okay, I've done it every single month. And so that's another thing as well. And another thing about consistency as well is automized behavior, automaticity. At the end of the day, you'll get to doing. Somebody asks me all the time, they're like, oh, your podcast, how are you doing it? How do you have the ability to do that for so long? And I'm like, and I ask, like, I'm not everyone, obviously, it can sound mean, but I'll just say, are you motivated to brush your teeth? Like, is it motivating to you? Like, no, I just do it. I'd say, are you driven to brush your teeth? Is it discipline? It's like, no. I was like, then why do you brush your teeth? They're like, I just do it. It's just kind of like, it's what you do. And I said, I have done the podcast for so long, for so many days. It takes no motivation, no discipline. It's just kind of what I do. I feel no depletion of any effort, because it is an automized behavior now. And so I think what people underestimate is when you do something and create those streaks, you can get it to a point to where it becomes a frozen habit, or just becomes something that you do. And then finally, I think these guys are really good, men and women are really good at having self-compassion. Let's say you aren't able to do something, or you get injured and you can no longer do something. Having compassion on yourself, say, you know what? All right, I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to find something else to work on, or, hey, you know what? It's okay to not do this thing for a day or a week or whatever. I'm diminish my worth. I'm okay with that. I think sometimes we live in a world, it's like, don't break the streak. And it's like, you know what? Sometimes, like, for example, this week, I'm not doing a podcast. And people are like, oh, you're not doing that? I'm like, nope. And I feel zero pressure. No, I broke the streak or whatever. And I'm like, no, that's all right. I'll pick it up next week. And that's fine. And so I think that is another part about it as well, where it's like, and sometimes I'll just break it on purpose. Just say, you know what? I don't want to be tied and feel like I'm controlled by the streak. No, I'm going to break it just to show that it doesn't have control over me. And just, I'm fine. I'm in control. It's not something I have to do.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I just love that, because it's communicating that the purpose of why you're doing it is I'm doing this because it has a purpose. I'm putting it out there to benefit people. However, it's not there to rule my life. It's not there to dictate everything that I do all the time. And so it's remembering the purpose of what you're doing. It was funny, as you were first talking, the first thing that you're talking about consistency and boredom, and embracing that boredom. We have a daughter that does ballet, and we were watching a documentary of Misty Copeland. And she was taking, in the documentary, she was showing you her daily routine, her workout that she was doing. And as you watch the documentary, it was really fun because from the outside, it looked like she's just standing at the bar and she's just standing there. But she's explaining each muscle that she's thinking about as she's working each specific muscle. But from the movement of what you're watching, she's barely moving. And after about 3 minutes, you start to see these little beads of sweat on her forehead. And that always has just been a really important visual for me to recognize that sometimes this hard work from the outside, for her, she was working something very specific and very boring because there was hardly any movement to it from us watching her. But yet I really recognize, I'm like, this is where you get to when you're willing to just focus on even the smallest little muscle and what is that muscle doing, and am I going to work that muscle today? So that was my visual as you were talking about this idea of embracing boredom and the patience that it takes. The other thing, I'm trying to remember how you said it, embracing the difficulty of getting better when it's basically imperceptible, like because you're doing so much consistently that progress seems imperceptible. I don't know how you said that. I want to go back and listen to it because I loved it. I was going to write it down, but I thought that's true. The difficulty isn't always in what you're doing as much as it is in accepting that what you're doing is going to have impact and to keep doing it. That can be hard.
I love that you said that, because I think a lot of people, they get discouraged because a lot of times progress is invisible. A lot of times
Right.
people are making progress and you're making strides, but you can't see it to the naked eye. And I think a common analogy we always use is the law of the bamboo tree. And it's one of my favorite stories, where you take a bamboo seed, for your audience who's not familiar with this, and you put it in the ground. And if you water it appropriately for an entire year, give it time, sun, your appropriate water, you'll see zero growth, nothing. You stick with it, you keep doing it again, year 2, you'll see no growth. Year 3, no growth. Year 4, no growth. After all that work, you're seeing no growth. But if you continue to streak and stay consistent, that little seed grows up to 90 feet in the first 6 weeks of year 5. Now, people would say, oh, wow, it grew 90 feet in 6 weeks. It's like, no, below the surface, without you realizing it, this seed was building this deep network of roots to prepare itself for the tremendous growth that was about to happen. I think a lot of people, they get discouraged and they stop streaks. They stop being consistent because they don't catch themselves winning. They don't see the invisible progress that they're making that you can't see with the naked eye. And I think that's a huge principle, is to catch yourself winning and even mark on a sheet of paper, okay, look at what I'm doing. Those are wins. You might not see the results. That's why we always talk about focus on the process and let the results take care of themselves, because it might be a while. There is a lag between the inputs and the outputs. We are complex adaptive systems, our bodies, and I think we want that. We think that success comes in a microwave, but no, success is made in a slow cooker, not a microwave. It's like it's going to be a long time.
That is so good. I love that analogy.
Me too.
You know, one of the other things that you mentioned that we've studied a lot about is what we refer to, and you referred to it as what we call most of the time streaks. And those streaks are, I'm doing it most of the time, meaning it's weekly or monthly. And there's sometimes where I have those streaks as compared to daily streaks. And the most of the time streaks are the ones that I'm going to do this 3 times a week, and that's going to be great. What's interesting psychology wise is when you do a most of the time streak, it's actually 100% because you're doing it every week or every month. And it changes your psychology in this way that you are having successes. One of the things that we talk a lot about, and that I have a little bit of an issue with, is the whole idea of, if you're not failing, you're not succeeding. And the reason I have an issue with that is because a lot of times we'll teach people that how to fail rather than how to succeed. And if I keep on failing at my goals, I'm learning how to fail rather than to succeed. Whereas if we switch that just a little bit and say, and I was curious of your thoughts on this, and say, you've had everyday successes. And when you have everyday successes, you're teaching yourself how to succeed. Then when a failure comes, you have a success to fall back to rather than a failure to fall back to. Your thoughts? Where do you go with that?
I think I really like I could definitely see the context and the principle behind it. I think there's a lot of nuance to it. I think I don't know under what circumstance, like a specific example. Um, I could see examples where that would be definitely, absolutely 100% true. And I'm trying to think, I can't think off the top of my head. The question I would ask is, under what conditions would it be good where failure is a huge part of it? I think, and can it be both? Can it be both? Going back to what you go, I'm going to go back a little bit and then forward. So a lot of times in our role, I love what you talk about, the research and science. There are a lot of global principles that are said out there that don't respect the nuance of individual situations and the nuance of human performance and developments. And I think, and every time I tweet something, I'm like, okay, under what conditions is this true? And then under
Oh,
what conditions is this not true? Because I think there are a lot of global principles set out there that I'm like, not always. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think everything is always has to have an asterisk next to it, because it's like, okay, like that's great, yes, but under this condition. So for example, we'll go to the most of the time streaks. So the research shows that that is indeed really good. Like you can stack wins on most of the time streaks. However, if you are trying to build a habit, the more gaps you have between iterations, it can, for some, create inertia. And you're like if you are trying to create a habit and you only do it 3 times a week or once a week, there's just a lot of gap in between there. You're less likely to do it in some cases. But if you're like, you know what, I'm going to start working out, I'm going to start by doing it every single day, just to get my rhythm down every single day. And then once I automize it, then I can go some of the time, kind of like my podcast. I knew I had to do it every single day so that I can do it most of the time. But I had to get the initial momentum going. So I think that's a great question to ask. It's like, and another thing as well is to collect data. I going to your point, if someone's listening to this and they're like, do I do it every day? Do I do it some of the time? Do I seek for success or do I pursue failure? What I would say is always, I said, what does your personal data say? Go try it. Try once a week. Try every day and pay attention to your behavior. Notice, what does it do to you? Do you feel any stress? Do you feel angst? Does it inspire you? Does it not? What does this do to you? And then we can kind of pull out some data. We're able to pull out and say, oh, notice patterns. We always say before you create a system, you need to understand the patterns and behavior of your current system. And so a lot of people are like, oh, how do I create patterns and streaks? I will always say, I don't know. How do you normally do it? What have you tried? And so let's go try it now. And so we understanding that human behavior is not binary. It is not mechanistic. It's more heuristic. It's more frameworks, and it can change. And so we're like, hey, go try this. Go try this for 1 month. Let's do it 3 times a week. Come back and let's notice it. Was it hard? Okay, now for this month, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it every day, just for 30 days. Every day. Which one did you like? What was good here? What was good there? Just to kind of create a framework for them. But no, I could totally see what you're saying about failure. Um, I think, and I wonder, could it be both? I think it could
yeah.
be both. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head, under what conditions could it be both? And under what conditions is one worse than the other?
Right. Because what I think about, and I love where you are talking about, it is human behavior is so dynamic and so many variables and so many different things, and looking at it and saying, what is true and in what conditions is that true? one of the areas that I think about as far as success, and it has a lot to do with what we've been talking about as far as inputs.
That's what I was going to say.
You
too.
can have success in inputs, and if you start to judge yourself by the accomplishments that you haven't achieved, then all of a sudden you lose what all those, if you haven't had the inputs, you lose all of that momentum and that steam of moving forward. Whereas if you have the consistent inputs, when you fail at the accomplishment, you have the success of the input to fall back to.
And you also have the recognition that, because if you're putting those inputs in, you may misinterpret your failure as that you're not doing the right thing, whereas in actuality it just needs to take a little bit of time to keep doing what you're doing. So that's what I was thinking as you were talking, as you asked your question. I thought really it's a refocus on recognizing the success of the inputs, not always putting that measurement on the output.
The success of the output.
The success of the output. And so
You remind me of the research on decision making. And what a lot of elite decision makers talk about is separating the results from the decision. So that is not, when you ask a group of people, what was one of the best decisions that you've made in your life? The great majority of people are going to talk about a decision that turned out well, because we naturally tend to say, oh, a good outcome meant it was a good decision. And that's not always the case. A lot of times you can make a great decision, but it could be a bad outcome. And not to conflate the two, not to mix the two up. A simple example is, let's say you run a red light. You decide to run a red light and you pass through the intersection unscathed. Like nothing happens. That does not mean it was a good decision.
Exactly.
You made just because you had a good results, that was a terrible decision. It was dumb. It was dumb luck. But let's say you decide to go through an intersection with a green light. You made a decision to go through and you get clipped. It was a green light. That doesn't mean it was a bad decision to go through a green light. It was just dumb luck. Someone ran a red light, completely out of your control. And what I hear what you two are saying is you are saying the very same thing, which I agree with 100%. You are saying just focusing on what you can control, your inputs. Okay, I'm going to do the input. And just because people always say hard work means you're going to be successful, work hard and you'll be successful. Not always. I can give you a million stories of people who work really, really, really hard and do not get the result they are looking for. They don't win the game. They don't win the championship. They don't get the promotion yet. They don't get that A on the test. If they work really hard, they don't get accepted to the job or that school or whatever. It's heartbreaking. That doesn't mean that the hard work, like, oh, I didn't work hard enough. No, you might have done it exactly what it just, they're looking for this, or they did this, or just the result didn't line up. And that doesn't mean all your work was bad. You didn't make a bad decision. All those streaks, that hard work, all that input wasn't bad. So we can't mix the results, conflate the results and the process. I love what you say. Stack those wins that you can control, the inputs, and then let the outputs take care of itself. I agree with that.
Yeah, well, that's and I appreciate, and one of the things that, as we do reading on what you have a lot of that in all of your psychology and everything else that you're teaching. And as I look at it, so one other little thing that's interesting, we talk a lot about the difference between a streak and a habit, and we define them differently. And I want to get your thoughts on this. We define a habit as, to your point, anything that you do automatically, and almost all the time it has to do with a motor skill of some sort. So I'll give you an example. So if I want to be a writer, then I'm going to use and let's just say I use a typewriter to do that. Over time, I'll develop the habit of typing where I won't think about what fingers hit what keys, but I'll have a streak to always write at least one sentence every day. Now, that's a decision that I'm going to make every day. It's a small decision. It's laughably simple, and so it becomes easy to do, but I never think about anymore where my fingers are hitting the keyboard, because if I had to, that would slow me way down. I need to make that into a motor skill that is repetitive. Whereas the actual decision, the streak that I call the streak of writing at least one sentence every day, that will never become automatic. In fact, it will become easier. And this is what I look at with your podcast. It becomes easier through time because you've built what I call the consecutive muscle. And when you build your consecutive muscle, it's a muscle that people usually don't work. That consecutive muscle starts to take over. And like you with the podcast and other people that we've seen, now my consecutive muscle is to the point where where I'm not struggling to make the decision anymore. But if at any point, and this is to your example, you can stop that and say, you know what, I'm not going to do my podcast this week, and that decision comes in. And you can start that up again. What's interesting is the habit or the automacy of typing on the keyboard. It can fade a little bit. But if you practice it again through time, all those motor skills will come back and you'll be able to do it. So that's what we look at, kind of the difference between the two is one is underlying where it helps its maintenance, the habit, whereas the other, the streak, has to do with anything that has to go with growth. Your thoughts? I'm just curious.
No, I like that. I really like that. And I think in addition to motor behavior, I think it can also be cognitive as well. I think we have when you get cut off on the street, we have certain habits, we have certain ways that we responded, and so however you respond, a lot of times the more you do something, the more likely you are to do it again. Just neurons that fire together wire together. This certain behavioral habits, certain cognitive habits, certain way we think, and it can happen so fast that we're not even perceptive to it. We don't even realize we do it. And I think what you're describing, I love what you're describing, but also we could fall in it also. What I love about habits and streaks is it's agnostic to good or bad. I think all of us have bad habits as well and bad streaks as well. And where some of them are just flying under the radar that we're not even aware of, that we have to bring awareness and conscious awareness to and say, whoa, I need to unfreeze that habit that I've been born with. Maybe I saw it growing up and I need to change my perception of it. But I really do like the distinction between habits, how you view habits and how you view streaks, because I believe that streaks, and I think because trying to think, like, because there could be streaks, because I'm thinking about sport. I always go back to my sport.
Right.
So in your example, in your experience, do you think someone could be experiencing a streak and not be aware of it?
I think that, so if they're not, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I think the point of, so when we started looking at streaking, the whole point of it was the component of intentionality, that this is something that I intentionally want to be a part of my life. And I think we rejected a little bit of the automacy in the sense that, because for me personally, I had things that I had done enough times that I wanted to be automatic, that I would do them without thinking about it, but I wouldn't. And so I needed something that I was like, no, I need this to be something that I do show a level of intentionality to all the time, that and it's like you said, it's a little bit of a nuance, but for me, that nuance came in the idea that I wouldn't have to show any level of intentionality. If I did it enough times, it would just be there and I could move on to other stuff and not think about this thing. And I don't know, in my experience, that I've had that happen. As I get things going and as I do it more often, the level of effort that I put into doing it, or the ability to be able to remember to do it, is there more often. But I still feel like I have to show a little bit of intentionality. I still have to, at some place, make that decision where I'm like, okay, I'm still going to do this. And that to me is why I think we've so much kind of taken on this idea of habit, because it gives you this perception that if I just do it enough times, I won't have to think about it and it'll just be a part of my life. And that feeling of if I do it enough, then I can move on to other stuff. And I feel like that hasn't been my personal experience. I've had to show that level of intentionality.
Yeah. Here's an example. I think of what I think you're talking about, Justin, and what I see is what we call the theory of displacement. So there are a lot of less valuable things that I do in my life, like for example, binge watch a television show over 6 days. It's probably not the most valuable thing that I could do over 6 days. And what I do with streaking is I displace less valuable activities with intentional activities that I'm going to decide to do. So I will, for example, a streak of read at least one paragraph in a nonfiction book and write at least one sentence, or write at least one sentence in my journal, and keep track that I did those. And then if I want to add in some less valuable things like binge watch my favorite television show, I can do that. But I did my level of intentionality first. And what happens through time is it displaces the less valuable activities that I've had in there. And I think that's what you're referring to, is it's like you can have things that are less valuable in your life, and there is some level of intentionality because I'm choosing to watch the television show or I'm choosing to do the particular thing. And if I look at it and say, well, but who I want to be is, in your case, a professional athlete, an elite athlete, I'm going to do these streaks first. And then if I have the time, energy, or focus, I may do some of these other less valuable activities. So you've essentially displaced less valuable activities with the valuable activities that are going to help you become who you want to be.
Mm. I really like what both of you are saying, and I think first, kind of going along with what I can't remember who was
Jami.
talking about this. Yeah, I can't remember who. I don't know which one of you were talking about this.
We're kind of both the same, so
no, this is so good. But one of the things that really resonated with me is, I think, so in my world, in professional sport, they have to make high-speed decisions where like you're not even really making a decision. And so that's why all those tiny little moves to the point to like you're not even thinking, like you're not you have
right.
you
They have to be
automated
habit. They have to be automatic.
Exactly. It has to be so automatic where you're not even deciding to do this because you have less than half of a second to make that decision.
Right.
And so that practice, the automaticity comes in so much towards like, okay, like I need to train so well to where this is my default. Like I'm not even deciding that this is. So I think that's where it is as well. And I think even the language that we use, like I think that's where I'm getting tripped up, is streaks and habits, because we don't use that vernacular.
Mm-mm.
We talk about systems and processes.
Right.
We are all about building systems. Okay, what is your system? We are inputs and outputs systems. Build a system. We always say wherever you see consistency, a system is in place. And so if you build the system and you take all these things into consideration, the output would be a streak. The output would be habits. And I think that's where I'm getting tripped up in this conversation. I'm like, okay, and I'm having professional athletes, and then, but yeah, I totally see what you're both saying. And so I think that's where I'm getting tripped up.
Yeah, see, and definition of terms is the beginning of wisdom, according to Aristotle. And that's what I love about what you just said, is streaking is a system. Mm-hmm. That's the thing about it, is it is a system and a process. And that's what I see in everything that you're doing and teaching, is this system and process, which is, hey, be intentional about what you do. So for example, with professional athletes, I remember reading about Tony Dungy, and he was, in The Power of Habits. He's talking about how he was training his linemen, that when you hear the snap of the ball, it's immediate. It's a reaction rather than a thinking decision. Whereas before that reaction ever happened, that's where the streak happens, is we're going to practice this every single time. We're going to make a deliberate decision, deliberate practice, to practice this every single time, so that in the high performance intense moment, you don't think about it anymore. I know that, when there's a certain setup in the infield, I'm going to go, this is going to be a double play. Second base, first base. I mean, you just don't even think about where you're going to throw the ball because you've practiced it so many times. and the system, the decision beforehand was that we're going to make it a streak to deliberately practice this, this many times a week or this many times a day or every single day, so forth and so on. So it is, and like you said, it's the nuance of language that's so great to be able to talk about it.
I really love what you said, though, that wherever you find consistency, there's a system in place, and recognizing that system. So you said you work on systems and processes. Is that right? That is,
Correct.
I like that. I like that a lot.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
So we're ending with time here, man. I'd love to keep going with you. This has been so invigorating. Hopefully you found it invigorating as well.
Yeah, no, this has been great.
In just the last moments here, as far as in your career, in your experience, and I want to relate this back to family. So how do you as a dad apply the principles that you teach elite athletes at home? And do the kids accept that? Or are they like, Dad, quit psychoanalyzing me here? How does that work?
Yeah, no, I think for us, and I remember when I wrote the book, Parent Pep Talks, I told our publisher, I am not writing this book. Like I told them, like, I had to be like, she twisted my arm to write it because I said, I do not want to be the parent expert. Like I don't want to say, because there are great parent experts out there, but I'm like, who am I to tell people how to like raise their kids? Like, who is anybody? Like, we don't know what we're doing. Like, nobody knows. And so we're just trying to figure it out. And everyone has their unique set of household norms and personalities, and our kids are different. Every child is so different. And so in our home, we're fumbling and bumbling along. And so my wife and I are very deliberate with systems that we have created and with our standards and our norms. And my wife has a chronic severe health issues, and I'm always traveling, and we have a daughter who's in a very high level actor, been with The Rock in his movies and now at Disney, and my son who's 16 and traveling and working with Justin Timberlake and Drake, and so this is new territory for us. But I think the streak and the system we've created, we're trying to create a place of normalcy because all of our industries are very, very unique, very different. It's easy to lose foot on what's real. It's easy to lose yourself on the goals of other people, whether it be fame and fortune and status, and that doesn't matter to us. What matters is just be a good person and love people and be humble and be kind and love your family. And so we are, as much as we possibly can, we are clinging on to family fundamentals and prayers and church on Sundays and family dinners to the extent we potentially can, and being open and sharing our failures. We always talk about, hey, this is what I struggle with today, and this is what we're going on. Like always. When our kids were younger, without fail, talk about streaking, we would ask them the same 3 questions every single day. And I don't know when we stopped doing it, but at least a decade straight, as long as they were able to talk. 3 questions when we would tuck them in at night, every single day, every night. What was the best part about today? What did you learn today? What are you going to do better tomorrow? Every single night. And we didn't explore it. It was short. It was quick. We got silly answers. We didn't question their answers. We didn't ask deeper. We wanted them to get used to answering those questions. What was the best part about today? What did I learn? And what am I going to do better tomorrow? Since they were 3, 4, like little kids. And I think our kids they talk about it. They're like, hey, remember when you used to ask us those questions? And it was really neat. And we didn't know what we were doing. It was just we didn't expect an outcome. It was just something silly and something we're like, oh, let's just keep doing it. It was organic. It was accidental, but we didn't realize the power that it produced in the output. It was really neat. The kids were really excited to share the good stuff that was happening, what they learned. And so I would like to think that it helped later on, but I have no evidence to support that. I'd just be making it up. But we try to be very deliberate about the environment we create here.
Justin, the conversation that we've had with you is inspiring to us, and thank you so much for all you do to not only promote all the goodness in the world, but also to help those elite athletes and everyone else with your podcast. Streakers, if you want to listen to Justin's podcast, you can do that anywhere podcasts are found. And it's, like we said, that 2 to 5 minutes of increase your impact. You want someone that's a coach to elite athletes to give you a little bit of advice and a little bit of information on how to increase your impact. You can do that. Again, it's 2 to 5 minutes. Justin Sua, you can listen to him there. You can also follow him on Instagram. He's got his Instagram account, as well as I think you've got your Twitter account out there as well, and any one of those places. Anywhere else you'd have people contact you or follow you, Justin?
No, that's it. Thank you.
You bet. Streakers, if you'd like to reach Jami or I, you could do that. Directly email us at Jeffrey, Jeffery, at streakingmastery.com or
JAMI at streakingmastery.com.
You're also welcome to buy the book at Barnes & Noble, Amazon. It's called Streaking, the Conscious Consistent Action that will create life-changing results. And you can also, most significantly, download the Streakin app, which is the social media platform for self-improvement. You want to see all kinds of people and their streaks and what they're doing to improve their lives. Go to the Apple App Store or to Google Play and download the Streakin app. Well, until we talk again next time,
keep streaking.
A better you.